The Galactic Concord had existed for nearly 10,000 years, a sprawling union of thousands of alien civilizations across spiral arms. Humanity, recently welcomed after centuries of proving itself worthy of entry, was still considered the bumbling newcomer. To the elder species, we were curious, loud, fragile, and utterly primitive. Our technology, though impressive by our standards, was laughably crude compared to the millennia-old civilizations. The Concord tolerated us as one might tolerate a child imitating adults. And that tolerance often came laced with scorn. Beginning, Ambassador Elena Rivas sat in the vaulted Hall of Speakers on Atheris Prime, the ceremonial capital of the Concord. The chamber itself could have fit a small city, levitating tiers arranged in concentric circles, each occupied by representatives of a member species. Humanity had been given a place near the edge, far from the central platform where the first races spoke. Elena had long grown used to the whispers, the chuckles, the clicking mandibles and rippling tendrils of amusement whenever she took her seat. Humans, they said, had muscles instead of bio-augmented sinew. They relied on combustion engines just 2 centuries ago. Their ships required protective plating instead of molecular phasing. To most Concord species, humans were nothing more than clever primitives who had gotten lucky. That morning, however, the contempt reached a new height. The Chlorothi delegation, a towering insectoid race whose empire had never lost a war, had just delivered their report. At the end, their speaker turned his multifaceted eyes toward Elena's tier. The bipeds from Seoul. What is your contribution to this summit? His mandibles clicked with derision. Another request for assistance. Another proposal we will reject. Laughter rippled through the hall, carried on dozens of alien voices. Elena felt her stomach twist. She had been trained to endure such mockery, but she saw the smirks and notes of pity even among humanity's supposed allies. Behind her, one of her aides, Dr. Marcus Hale, a linguist, muttered, "Every time. They won't take us seriously." Elena squeezed his hand briefly in warning. "Patience," her eyes said. But Marcus's jaw was tight. He had been cataloging alien languages for years now, ever since a chance discovery in the ruins of the extinct Kethri species had changed his career. And that discovery would soon change everything. Middle. The Concord summit that day centered around the Zorith crisis. The Zorith were a newly emergent race, terrifyingly aggressive, burning through colonies on the galactic fringe. They had not answered hails. They had not shown interest in negotiation. They only advanced. Every delegation argued over how to respond, deploy fleets, sanction trade, evacuate worlds. But nothing unified them. Petty rivalries and ancient grudges poisoned the discussion. After hours of bickering, Elena requested the floor. "Honored delegates," she said, her translator implant broadcasting her words in 1,000 tongues. "Perhaps humanity can offer." But her voice was drowned in mocking laughter before she could continue. "You," hissed the Chlorothi speaker. "What can primitives offer against the Zorith? Send your wooden ships and stone blades." More laughter. This time it was crueler. Marcus Hale stood. He wasn't supposed to, not without clearance. Elena tried to motion him down, but he ignored her. His voice rang across the chamber. "You mock us because we are young," Marcus said. "But youth carries curiosity. Curiosity leads to discovery. And discovery may reveal things even you, with all your vaunted wisdom, have forgotten." The laughter faltered, though most aliens still regarded him with annoyance. Marcus drew a small hollow projector from his satchel. A sphere of light flickered, forming glyphs, spirals, lines, strange mathematical sigils that shimmered in pale blue. During an excavation on Ketheri ruins near Delta Scorpii, Marcus continued, we uncovered fragments of a language. You call it dead, extinct, unreadable, but I have devoted 10 years of my life to deciphering it. And I believe it was not just a language but the root tongue, the proto-concord if you will. The speech of your shared ancestors. A ripple moved through the hall. Silence spread like wildfire. Many species shifted uneasily. Others leaned forward with sudden, sharp attention. Marcus inhaled and spoke. Not in English, not in galactic trade speech, but in the low, rolling cadence of the ancient glyphs. Eraktal voru, Sinlarkoryu. The chamber froze. Delegates who had laughed seconds before now trembled. The Orville, whose crystalline bodies refracted light, dimmed into pale gray. The serpent-like very coiled tightly, their scales rattling. The insectoid Chlorothi hissed sharply and reared back. Elena's eyes widened. She didn't know what Marcus had said, but the effect was undeniable. What did you just utter? Demanded one delegate, voice quivering. Marcus let the glyphs rotate in the air. A greeting, he said simply. One preserved in the oldest strata of the Ketheri ruins. A salutation used by the first speakers, the progenitors of your races before the concord even existed. Murmurs erupted. Elena felt the weight of the chamber shift. The laughter was gone, replaced with something else entirely. Fear, reverence, memory. The Chlorothi speaker leaned forward slowly, his multifaceted eyes wide. You, a human, speak the tongue of origin. Marcus nodded. Yes, and more than speak it. I can read, translate, and reconstruct fragments. Enough to know it is not just ceremonial. It contains directives, codes, histories locked within syntax. Perhaps even strategies against ancient enemies like the Zorith. Shockwaves rippled through the tiers. The chamber that had mocked humanity now buzzed with alarm. The Orville delegate whispered, that tongue has been forbidden for millennia. None alive recall its cadence. The very delegate hissed. It was said only the gods spoke it. And suddenly humans were no longer children. They were messengers from a forgotten age. The revelation. In the days that followed, Elena and Marcus were summoned repeatedly. Not mocked, but pleaded with. Delegates demanded demonstrations. Marcus recited fragments, decoding murals and glyphs long considered meaningless. Each time, the effect was the same. Hushed awe, recognition in the eyes of species who remembered faint echoes of that language in their oldest myths. Soon it became clear. The language was more than ritual. Buried within it were records of an ancient war. The Zorith were not new. They had risen before, tens of thousands of years ago, only to be defeated by the Proto-Concord through unity. The instructions were clear. The only way to defeat them was for the Concord to act as one, coordinated, not squabbling. The first speakers had designed the language itself as both record and key, binding their descendants in shared memory. And humanity, in its curiosity, had unlocked it again. Climax. The Concord's fleets were in disarray, fractured by distrust. But when Marcus stood before them in the Hall of Speakers, robes heavy with translated glyphs, and recited the call of unity in the tongue of origin, something miraculous happened. Species who had been enemies for centuries lowered their weapons. Delegations that once mocked humans bowed their heads. The words resonated not just as sound, but as memory encoded into genetic resonance, tones that struck chords within ancient DNA. Even the mighty Chlorothi knelt. By the blood of our progenitors, they hissed, we heed the call. The fleets assembled, not as fractured banners, but as one armada. And at its heart, leading the strategy, stood the humans, the ones who had remembered what others had forgotten. When the Zorith came, they found not scattered prey but a unified concord. Human officers worked alongside alien admirals, their commands laced with the ancient tongue that resonated across species. The Zorith advance shattered against the combined armada, driven back in a blaze of unity unseen for millennia. Ending. After the war, the concord changed. Humanity's seat was no longer at the edge of the chamber. It was moved closer to the center, beside the elder races. When Elena next entered, there was no laughter. There were nods of respect. But the greatest change was not in rank or prestige. It was in the stories whispered across 1,000 worlds. The young race spoke with the voices of the dead. They awakened the words of our gods. They reminded us who we were. Elena often found Marcus in his study, surrounded by glowing glyphs, his hands tracing patterns in the air. "You realize," she teased once, "you've turned humanity from a laughingstock into something like prophets." Marcus smiled faintly, eyes still on the ancient runes. "Not prophets. Just students who listened harder than the rest." He looked up then, eyes bright. "But perhaps that's always been humanity's gift. Not our weapons, not our ships, our curiosity." And across the stars, among species that had once sneered, the echo of the dead language carried on, spoken by humans, the youngest race of the Concord, who reminded the galaxy of its oldest truth: unity.